Hello, Australia, and welcome to the BAP. It is I don't even know what the date is. This is the 10th of September, 2017, and that is a prelude to how rough and ready today's show is going to be. Joining me today, as per usual, is Jason. Not joining me today is Dean, who's out sick. Man down.
Yeah, he's been down for the better part of this week, I think.
Yes, with the
some genuine full-fledged man flu there.
What is a man flu? Is that a female propaganda?
I feel you might be treading in dangerous areas by going into this. It's the fact that men seem to suffer from flus a little when they do catch them worse than other genders,
and some sort of suggestion that
perhaps it's unwarranted.
A bit more about it.
It's possible. There may be some truth to this.
I've never been. In my life, I've never been accused of having man flu, but I've seen it in obviously social media memes and so forth.
Yeah. I've certainly felt like I've had a worse flu than anyone else has ever had before in their life.
Well, I'll put a caveat on that. Whilst I may never have been accused of having man flu, I've been accused of being a big bitch for complaining about having a cold and not drinking up at social outings.
I think we've all been accused of that.
I'm having very difficulties at the moment trying to determine if the show's coming up live.
That's what I'm trying to do at the moment.
Hopefully something's happening. Oh, it looks like we've got something coming on live. Excellent. We're live.
So what's on the douchebag buffer?
Well, I did something that I was very rewarded from doing. You familiar with the Mad Max franchise?
Oh, yes.
I decided, I've been actually wanting to do this for quite some time, was to rewatch Fury Road. I have now a good enough TV and sound system to watch it as it should be. It's a big TV, curved Panasonic Wonder.
Did you not see it at the cinema?
I did, but I was cursed when I went to see it at the cinema because I was going there with huge expectations of what I thought the movie would be about, even though I do think I read reviews about it. But it's called Mad Max, but it's not really about Mad Max. And I think the problem is when you go into the movie and you look and you're going in there trying to see the story through the prism of Mad Max, that's not what you're getting. So I did enjoy it the first time round, but the whole time I was watching that movie, I was thinking, when's the Mad Max storyline going to start happening? And it doesn't happen. So this time, now that I came back to it, so it was released in 2015. I've now come back to it 2 years after the fact. I know what the storyline is, so now I can just enjoy the movie for what it is. I'm not coming there with any preconceptions that it's going to be this, that, the other.
It's some childhood baggage that it might have been carrying.
Well,
as a movie, let's face it. If there's an iconic movie from our childhood, Mad Max is one of them. You know what I mean?
Australian movie.
Yeah.
Yes. So this time I got to watch the movie with no baggage. I knew what it was about, and this time I could just enjoy it for what it was, knowing what the story arc was, and I loved it. But I must admit, and I'd probably say this for a lot of people, go back and watch it again if you haven't seen it.
I saw it twice at the cinema. I loved it.
Really?
Yeah. I went and saw it. I think I went and saw it with my kids, my boys, and I went back and I went, you know what? This is a movie that my partner, who can be pretty selective in what movies she enjoys, she may also enjoy. I was a little bit wrong on that count. However, I got to see it twice. I got to see it a second time.
And you weren't complaining.
And I wasn't complaining about it.
Seeing it for the second time, I could see what a standout performance Charlie Theron did as Furiosa.
Yeah, great. And her great job as Furiosa. Most of the acting around her was pretty good as well. Yeah. And Tom Hardy as a hood ornament was fucking awesome, I thought.
Yes, and it worked. I mean, when you watch it knowing it's not a Mad Max storyline,
it was like a nice introduction here. Like the next movie could be more centered around him, and that would fit, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But that was definitely not his story. It was Furiosa's story. Yeah, and
also Nux's story to a bigger extent than even Mad Max.
Yeah, he was just an also ran. He was like Indiana Jones in the Indiana Jones movie. He was there, but it made no difference.
Yes, and no, I loved it, and I just thought it was great.
And the effects, the kind of mythos and the world they built there. Yeah, it was interesting too. It was interesting the way he took the tech. They did a little bit more world building than the original Mad Max franchise did.
To an extent. I mean, they didn't really explain some of those other
settlements and things like that. But however, in Mad Max, in the whole series, you barely heard anything of any other settlements.
True.
You had Bartertown, but no one mentioned of anyone Bartertown was bartering with.
Yeah.
It was just this standalone place out in the middle of the desert or out in the wasteland. Whereas, yeah, they kind of hinted at a broader world in this one. And there was some unexplained little phenomena as they were passing through the wetlands, and there were those weird people that were sort of living through there.
Yeah.
It definitely it made for an interesting world that I would love to see another movie in.
Well, allegedly, George Miller does have 2 completed scripts for sequels.
Right.
And obviously it was good.
And if you could get Tom Hardy back.
Well, Tom Hardy was committed to 3 movies.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So, yes, it would be interesting. I mean,
Tom Hardy seems to love doing movies where his face is continually obscured by a mask or something like that. He's just at home there.
I always thought it was going to be very difficult to find another actor to do the Mad Max character, particularly someone who wasn't Australian.
Yeah,
there's an aspect to the Australian character that I don't think Americans can capture. And I mean, Tom Hardy's an Englishman, but
yeah, I think the English can do a pretty fair approximation when they want to. But I don't think there was nothing overtly Australian about this one. There was a lot of accents. There was some Australian accents, but there was quite a few. There was quite a few sort of.
I thought
accents that could have been from anywhere, if you know what I mean, as well.
I don't know why this is the case, but I didn't notice Charlie Theron's accent as much as I noticed.
I think Tom it was Hardy's just that generic,
problematic.
Oh, right, okay.
But once again, made based on you're being Max and you don't sound like Max.
The point I guess I'm making is that I don't think in this new reboot of Mad Max that that it's necessarily set in Australia, whereas the original trilogy were definitely within Australia. Yeah. That was where they were. Whereas I don't think this one's...
Well, they used the cars were Australian cars.
Well, that's a nuance that's going to be lost on many...
an international audience.
Especially anyone under the age of about 20 or 25.
And they did have Australian actors in there, and they were using Australian slang. So
well, the original... who was the big guy in the mask and everything like that? He was from Mad Max 1. He was the...
was he?
The Knight Rider from...
Oh, okay.
From Mad Max 1. They brought him out to sort of essentially play that role.
So, that's got my top pick. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I like that. I might have to go back and have another look at that movie. I haven't seen it in a while, but as I said, saw it twice at the cinema. And it was worth seeing on the big screen. Yeah. It was huge. Yeah. I hear they've re-released like a black and white version as well, which would be interesting. It's just they've been doing... It's one of these movies which seems to be getting slotted down for cinematic history in some way, and there's been some more experimental stuff done with it. I think it's pretty good. I think it's a pretty amazing movie. 2 thumbs up, a big A+.
I binge watched season 3 of Rick and Morty and really enjoyed it. I must admit, you introduced me to Rick and Morty a few years back, and the first season I found a bit hard to find my way with it.
Then you had Hit a Weed. And always says.
Actually,
I don't know if that's how it happened, but I was probably stoned the first time I heard it.
But I watched it without any sort of illicit substances.
It's pretty clever. Yes. It's pretty clever writing. It's just smart comedy and unrelenting in many ways.
Edgy comedy as well.
It's pretty edgy. Yeah, it's edgelord for sure.
Because you do have the issue where you have minors being put into a lot of adult situations. So, I mean, and that's not to say that hasn't been explored in the past with things like South Park and
Family Guy
and so forth.
Yeah,
but they seem to try and push it even further.
I think I've got a few to catch up on Rick and Morty, actually, a couple of them. I haven't really been watching much else this week. Here's a reason. There's one possible reason why. There must have been a recent crackdown from the authorities onto which websites you can access.
Well, yes, they did close down quite a few streaming sites.
Yeah, and I think that's affected my viewing somewhat. Just in case this evidence may be used against me, I was not streaming anything that was not freely available and perfectly allowable. But yeah, I think that's definitely caused a few issues.
trying to go the non-pirating route, going on Geordie Adventures route, I signed up for Foxtel. There was a 2-week free trial. I went, I'll give that a go. And I was thinking, this is great. There's lots of content here. Thinking, yeah, I might stay on. And then, when I got cycled through to paying, so I've paid the first month, everything shuts down. There's like a little sliver of some TV content you get access to, and that's it for $15 a month.
So you had the full access.
I didn't realise I had full access.
Yeah, that's how they see it. That's how they get you.
And I'm paying...
It's the entry drug. It's the gateway drug, was it?
I pay $9 a month or whatever it is for Netflix.
So what do you get?
Which
You
is
get
lots
the
of content.
sports channel.
When for $15 a month, I can't even figure out what I get. Everything's locked.
I think. See, I had Foxtel for a few years, and I had the premium thing, and I had the Foxtel IQ, which made it worthwhile because you could actually, it was
Record
like
stuff.
But then I realized I almost wasn't. It was just the content gets repeated so frequently, and there's so little new content actually coming through that it wasn't worth it in the end. But and there was just all these Hitler documentaries and crazy stuff like that on the history. Like the History Channel was not a good History Channel. It was, and Sci-Fi Channel was just Star Trek retreads over and over again. So I don't think you're missing a whole lot, but maybe it's changed. Maybe it's changed in the last few years. But really, it was a lot of. It was very. You would have found after a month that you're going, hang on, they're just cycling the same programming through each channel on a 24-hour basis kind of thing, and you weren't actually getting that much. Anyway, so now what are you getting? The sports channel? You must be getting at least that.
Just like 90s era comedy TV shows, and that's about it.
Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Lots of Seinfeld.
Pretty much. Seinfeld, but yeah, things of that nature. Friends and...
You're going to cancel it shortly,
yes,
I imagine.
It's on my list of things to cancel.
Would you at least, under the plan you've got, would you have gotten the Game of Thrones episodes under this plan?
Yes, you do get the Game of Thrones for that.
So you would have got that.
Yes.
That I can see if you're getting that content, that might make it worthwhile.
For that period of time, yeah. That's not too bad.
Oh well.
Right. Oh well, if that's all we got for douchebags, let's go into the news content. The only thing I've got here is last week on Thursday, the High Court removed any final hurdles for Turnbull to go ahead with his postal vote for marriage equality. So
it's away they go.
It's thunder Turnbulls I go.
This is just the most pointless exercise I've seen in Australian political.
I don't understand.
In recent political history. I mean, it's the weirdest thing. It's if it comes back yes, which we would hope it does, then they go ahead and maybe have the vote. I don't think that's an absolutely sure thing, is it?
No.
I mean, they could still risk the public ire and decide not to do it.
There's nothing binding about this vote.
And then they have the vote, and if either if either the plebiscite, the mailed out plebiscite comes back as a no, or if the vote goes ahead and comes back as a no, nothing changes. It's going to be, you're going to have the same people agitating for marriage equality. Yep. It's just going to keep going and going and going. It's ridiculous.
I just really don't understand.
It does nothing to... Well, I mean, it's the opportunity to do something about it, but you just know the powers arrayed against it. They're trying desperately to achieve nothing out of this process.
It's a stalling tactic.
Yeah, doing absolutely everything they can to achieve nothing, hopefully, and therefore not be held accountable at the next election.
Obviously, there's a lot of dead weight in the coalition that's holding them back from moving forward on this. There's probably a lot of more progressive thinkers in the coalition party that just want to put this behind them. They know that a no vote will not put this issue to rest.
But as I said, it's going to keep rearing its ugly head no matter what. And I suspect if we eventually just got it, that the next cultural war action will be something different. I don't know. Maybe then they'd move on to something like, okay, they've allowed marriage equality. I know the next step is, and the next step that's been voiced is that the abilities of gay couples to adopt.
Yes.
And that they see this as the thin edge of the wedge, the slippery slope, and that which to an ultimate sort of destination that really shouldn't be so disfavored anyway. So it's ridiculous. But that would be the next battle, I guess.
Yes. Well,
that's the best situation we can get out of this.
And the reason why I was focusing on this a little bit is I've been wondering when I'm going to be bombarded by the No campaign. I haven't really been touched by the No campaign as of yet. I'm just wondering whether, obviously I'm not their target audience to sort of try and capture.
Well, it's interesting because I haven't seen much of any campaigning. I think
I've seen stuff.
There's been a few ads come
Yes.
up on commercial TV, but they seem so innocuous and even so obliquely. They're coming at the situation so obliquely. Sometimes you don't even realise what they're campaigning against, if you know what I mean.
Well, I don't watch commercial TV, so I don't see.
I've only
any
seen.
adverts.
I watch commercial TV, but I've got someone who's fairly religious about muting the volume when ads come on. So half the time, I never get to see what's actually going on.
So you just have to assume whenever you see the nuclear family coming onto TV, it must be pro.
It's probably some kind of.
It's for the no vote.
So there may have been a lot more campaigning going on that I'm just not aware of. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but one of the personalities that I've been following, and I was going to be doing discussion about today, but I think we'll save it for next week. But this particular guy, Blair Cottrell, he definitely tweeted out a few things. So he's the leader of the UPF, the United Patriot Front, and there are a bunch of neo-Nazi alt-righters that go along to these Reclaim Australia rallies and hate everything that's Islamic, basically. But he chimed in on the gay marriage debate, and it was.
Let me guess, he was for the no side.
He's showing some political savvy in that he's not saying necessarily he's for the no side, but he's not, for God's sake, going to have anyone tell him how he should vote. And when he's talking about who should not be telling him, he's clearly talking about leftists and stuff like that. I mean, you don't have to dig very hard. But he's not made his mind up, and it's for the kids. He's what he will vote for. He'll be considering how it's going to affect his kids down the line.
Yeah,
and stuff like
that's I've seen that coming from the yes side about how the marriage equality vote is about freedom of speech, and it's about children's education.
I'll see if I can bring this, guys. I've got a whole bunch of the actual tweet photos of what this guy's been doing. I mean, it sounds like small bickies, this guy's on Twitter, but he's got a fairly extensive following and seems to gather a large number of people around him whenever he turns up.
Gets a bit of retweet
places.
action.
Yes, around a place like Bendigo, but this might take a little while to come up. Anyway,
Well, I saw, as I was saying, Lyle Shelton being interviewed. He's the leader of the Australian Conservative Christian ACL, Australian Christian League, or whatever they're called.
Yeah,
Trying to say it was trying to twist the issue to garner more mainstream support for the no vote by saying it's an issue of freedom of speech, suggesting that people won't be allowed to advocate their view in the future, advocate their views on the traditional definition of male and female marriage.
yeah. Isn't it weird how they really seem to be everything's an issue of freedom of speech these days?
Yeah,
isn't it?
freedom of speech, and the hardcore, extreme LGBTI education agenda in schools.
Yeah.
It's funny how they use the same language when describing fundamental Islamic terrorism to apply it to marriage equality, people for the side for marriage equality.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, you're drawing at straws now.
Here's what Blair Cottrell had to say briefly about it: was all of the ridiculous yes activism and propaganda is doing more damage to the gay marriage campaign than Conservatives ever could. I don't know how. I'm going, what do you mean yes campaign? It's simply pissing people off who are determined to vote no, perhaps.
Yes.
It's not doing any fucking damage to their campaign. It's a bit weird, but I don't know. It really does seem to be mostly the idea that this is the thin edge of a wedge towards something that's going to harm our society even more, which is just completely bizarre.
Yeah.
I don't know what else we got on Newsies this week. I haven't really.
Well, not much has been happening.
Well, it's weird.
Well, we've got another hurricane about to touch down in Florida.
You know, that's probably why
Irma.
probably why we haven't got as much to talk about Trump this week, is because we've had 2 hurricanes hitting America.
Yes, so the first one is it Harvey?
Harvey.
Yeah, he touched down in Texas.
And completely flooded Houston
Yes.
and a couple other cities.
It's been interesting listening to the Majority Report pointing out how Texas is predominantly a Republican state, who are very anti-Washington, but now are quite receptive to Washington handouts.
Very much so. Those FEMA camps that everyone was railing against, saying they were possibly going to be relocating any all good Christian, God-fearing people. Suddenly, those FEMA camps are very welcome in those areas. And so Houston, fourth largest city in America, apparently, fourth most populous, just flooded. And like they're talking about the amount of damage that's been done to that place. And now there's another one bearing down, Cyclone Irma or Hurricane Irma, which has hit Puerto Rico, I believe, and already caused upwards of 30 deaths or something like that.
Yeah. And
now is looking to traverse the length of the Florida Dong.
Yeah. The Florida what?
The Florida Dong. The droopy penis that is Florida in the edge.
Not
of
familiar with that, but I mean, if you think you can come in here and try and spice up ratings with salacious talk,
well, I mean, we were talking. It's pretty harsh that we're talking about something so serious, but it's going to be traversing the length of Florida, and it's like a Category 5 hurricane, which apparently in order to reach Category 5, you have to have wind speeds of over 155 kilometers per hour or something like that. This has been sustained wind speeds of 185.
Oh, jeez.
They don't know quite. I mean, there's people. I've seen the news where people streaming out of Florida or out of the Florida Keys, especially. Yeah. And
a lot of wealthy people have been evacuating Florida.
There's fairly wealthy areas, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those sort of beachfront properties. I mean, there's Trump's Mar-a-Lago down there somewhere.
Yeah.
Wonder what happens if that gets flooded.
Yeah, I just say that anywhere that's nearby Mar-a-Lago will be well looked after in terms of
I'm wondering how that. Yeah, this might be a case where you can see some government intervention happening directly in certain areas of Florida.
Well, looping back to the disaster that's currently beset Texas, Donald Trump managed to do a deal against the interest of his fellow Republicans, where he did a deal to drop punt the
debt ceiling
for 3 months to secure funding for Texas.
This is kind of bizarre, because when this is one thing where he can actually hold it over the Obama administration, where they took months and months of negotiations, and at one stage, I believe government spending was actually halted for a couple of weeks.
Yes, it was.
And whereas now the deal maker is just stepping in and making a deal.
Well, it's angered House Speaker Paul Ryan, because he wanted to kick it to 18 months past the 2018 midterms, and Trump's has just gone in and made a deal.
I don't think he likes Paul Ryan.
No, and I don't think anyone likes Paul Ryan. Guy's an imbecile. But the problem is, it's now making it look like, a Republican-controlled House and Senate can't pass anything. Well, what have they accomplished? They control all three levels of government, but have managed to achieve nothing.
Well, it sounds a lot like our local federal government, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, their margin's a lot slimmer.
But I mean, parties of inaction, when they get voted into power, suddenly can't actually achieve anything when all their energy's been taken up into blocking whatever legislation anyway. But there hasn't. I know there must be other stuff that's happening in the States, but all the news of these hurricanes has been drowning just about everything else out. Although, I don't know, here's a little bit of just personal sort of mockery that I enjoyed. The Majority Report, did you see the episode they did? We're talking about Mike Cernovich on the Alex Jones show?
Yes. How he was talking out of turn about Trump.
This is one of the reasons why I started looking into, Mike Cernovich is one of the reasons I started looking into taking Twitter personalities and YouTube personalities a little more seriously, because at first you were saying, who wants to hear about these? These are just nobodies on the internet. And then suddenly some of these people started to get direct press access to the president and things like that. One of these people was Michael Cernovich, who clearly had connections within the White House and was breaking certain news and stuff like that. And he ended up on the Alex Jones show. And as the Majority Report was pointing out, Alex Jones was like, who the hell is this idiot that's popped up on my show? He, I can't remember the incredibly elongated story he went into that left even Alex Jones completely nonplussed.
For those who aren't familiar with Alex Jones, the guy's a nut job. He thinks there's a reverse vampires are controlling the shadow
the
government.
lizard people. The lizard people are definitely involved.
This might sound like we're being, exaggerating. It's not far from
The
where.
fluoride is turning the frogs gay.
Yeah.
Fluoride in the water is turning the frogs gay.
Friend of Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Friend of Joe Rogan. This guy has, and Alex Jones, has a huge following. I would not be surprised if people have at least heard of him.
Oh, speaking of Joe Rogan, I was meant to tell you this, guys. He had Kamar Bell on. Now, J. Kamar Bell? Is that his name?
Yeah. H. Kamar Bell.
H. Kamar Bell, who
From
was
Political
one half
Reactionary.
of he's got some other shows, but where I know him well from is, I don't know him at all, but where I am aware of him from is he does a podcast with another fellow who I can't remember the name of. Yeah, it's called Denzel Washington is the
greatest actor of all time, period or something. Yeah.
Excellent show, not only for learning about Denzel Washington, and if you're an aficionado of Denzel Washington, having affirmation towards that, but you get a positive insight to black culture, which I found thoroughly interesting.
Because Denzel was out there for black culture.
They're talking about black people who have achieved significant notoriety and fame, as opposed to, we're always bombarded with the sort of gang culture of African Americans, whereas this is talking about African Americans who have achieved.
So how did his appearance go on Joe Rogan? Because
it was great, but it was funny watching what I could only call Joe Rogan being on his best behaviour.
Really,
in his having his best progressive.
I find H. Kamau Bell, because he does another podcast called Politically Reactive with Hari, and I can't pronounce his last Indian name, Kindamalu or something. It's a mouthful, but I tend to find H. Kamau Bell can be a little bit on the centrist side of politics, a little bit, whereas his partner in that one, Hari, definitely is of the further left sort of variety, and he will call things out. But then so when you get Joe Rogan, Joe Rogan has some some strange views. I want H. Kamau Bell to call him out on that kind of stuff. So
we didn't get an opportunity because Joe Rogan didn't arc up on one of his favourite pet subjects.
That's really lame.
Transgenders using toilets.
That's really lame.
H. Kamau Bell twice said a couple of throwaway lines about the whole issue about transgender people using the bathrooms they identify with their sex.
He did it on the actual
podcast, and Joe didn't buy it.
Oh, gutless Joe Rogan.
That's one of his pet projects.
And that means
he thinks society will fall apart. Well, he doesn't. No,
that makes me. I'm gonna have to listen to it because that makes me like H. Kamau Bell even better. That he was dropping that in there.
Yep. Oh, I don't know
whether he's trying to bait it out of him or something like that.
I wonder.
He's a pretty smart guy, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he was.
Yeah, and he didn't buy it. Not at all. Not once.
How long was the interview? An hour or something like that. Because the reason I asked that is because Joe Rogan, I just don't have a whole lot of faith in him. He did like 3 hours with Sargon, of which I could only listen to half of it. I can't believe I actually listened to that much of it. But the guy will dedicate endless amounts of time to absolute fucking nobodies, and I don't know. I thought maybe he only gets a half an hour with H. Kamau Bell, which is somebody who's pretty good.
It went the distance.
Okay,
but I don't know if perhaps Joe Rogan's a bit more sensitive to be seen to becoming controversial with an African American guest.
It seems remarkably, constrained of him, doesn't it?
It was because he dropped it 3 times as a throwaway line, and Joe didn't buy it.
Joe didn't go anywhere near
Joe does, and that's one of his favourite topics, because he's always gone on about how if a guy starts dressing up as a woman, going in, it'll encourage men to dress up as women to go into toilets to rape females. That's Joe's line about.
That's where he thinks the danger is. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And I've seen him get quite vocal on that topic when he's given a chance.
Well, I'm going to have to listen to this. I'm going to have to listen to this interview now because I want to see what Joe Rogan can be frustrating that way. Like, because that's one reason why I don't like all his interviews is because sometimes he's giving enough rope and you can hear him call out and call someone out on a certain subject, and then other times he's deliberately not. And with Milo Yiannopoulos, he treated that guy with kid gloves while he was on.
Yeah.
And really, he could have ripped into him on any number of subjects, but chose not to. So,
well, I mean, don't forget that Joe actually likes Milo as a person, so he only challenged him to a certain point. I mean, Joe's an interesting cat, and I enjoy his style of interviewing. I mean, his interviews not only show a lot about the person he's interviewing, but it shows a lot about himself.
It's the other.
But he's not afraid to sort of challenge. He won't necessarily let someone go on. He will challenge them.
Well, as you said, he's a mixed bag, because sometimes there's been some interviews ago. Yeah, that's pretty good. He's done all right. But then other times, like this thing with Hari, where clearly a subject he has no problems talking about with perhaps other like-minded people, but then suddenly with H. Kamal Bell, who's someone who's fairly astute, and you can imagine he could probably talk on the subject a little bit, suddenly he's got no comment. He's got no comment on it.
I mean, to be fair, Joe Rogan doesn't advertise himself as being progressive or left. He just...
Yeah, but dude, he runs a 3-hour fucking show where he'll sit there with people and he won't raise that subject once when it's been dropped 3 times. That's crazy. I was just trying to think of another...
We also had Kelly left the Majority Report.
Yeah. She's been there 2 years.
Yeah, it's been some time. She's gone to TIT.
Yeah. TYT has recently had a $20 million investment.
By who?
I don't know if there's any one particular name, but it's by like a media company has said he is essentially, because he did a bit of a show on it. So it's essentially it's an angel investor almost, because there's no strings attached kind of thing. But they're obviously seen as a bit of an investment, and quite rightly so. They built that up. Jengu has built that up from nothing, and it's quite a going concern. But they're clearly spending that money, and I know because they did it in the past where they did like essentially a GoFundMe. So they said we want to hire 3 journalists for a year to do this kind of work, and put that up as a GoFundMe and got the money, and they hired 3 journalists. Sometimes I'm a little bit dubious about Cenk's choices in who he hires, because he's had some fairly weird ones in the past. There's a couple from the deep past which I can't even remember the names of, which are no longer there. But Dave Rubin was one of his, and there was another chick who went off to become in the early days essentially a party apparatchik for a right wing media outlet. And then there's so Kelly moving over there. A journalist like Michael Tracy, who's a bit dubious in his he was one of the 3 they hired off this Kickstarter and that. But Kelly going over there, she's definitely going to be earning a bit more money or something, getting more exposure as well.
Yeah.
Although I imagine Majority Report must be doing okay these days. Surely they must be able to come to the. They're going to have to do something to hold on to Matt Leck and clearly, Michael Brooks is going about his own ventures now. So.
Yeah, he's launched the Michael Brooks show.
Too much Michael Brooks.
Have you had an opportunity to listen to it?
Listen to it. There's been some good stuff on it, actually. It has been, but I mean, I know your problem with it is too much Michael. Give me too much Michael, and that might be an issue for some people.
My problem with Michael is I actually do like the topics he covers. He does cover some really interesting stuff that you don't necessarily get to hear on the Majority Report or other news outlets. So like a lot of in-depth analysis about what's happening in Turkey, for instance, which I find fascinating. But I just find him annoying.
Well, I can
articulate. He can really present his points and frame a topic really well. I think but just his arrogance comes through.
I don't mind the arrogance so much, but sometimes Sam knows how to trigger him, and by calling him out on something, and you can hear it and then Michael gets all defensive, and that's kind of I find that amusing. But he said some of the shows blocked off behind the paywall, I think, behind the Patreon paywall, but he puts out 1 or 2 a week, which are free. And it's interesting because he's getting a lot of Twitter guests and things like that. So activists from those sort of circles on board. And he's had a couple on, and they do phone-in interviews and things like that with some sort of personalities that I can see commenting through Twitter and stuff like that. So journalists doing that kind of work. That's kind of interesting. And he's got those a lot of the imitations, which work quite well.
Has he?
And he workshops them obviously with Matt Leck a little bit beforehand and stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Has he invited Jimmy Reefer Cake onto the show?
I wonder. I think there's a standing
There is a
invitation.
standing
I
invite
think.
for Michael Brooks to come onto the Jimmy Reefer Cake.
Oh, right.
All
Matt
the
Leck's been
Hypocrisy
on
show.
Jimmy Reefer Cake
Oh,
show.
has he?
Yeah. You can go back and listen to that one
Is
if
it
you
good?
want. But it's the only episode of Jimmy Reefer Cakes I've listened to. I can't really say. I mean, I love Jimmy Reefer Cake, but I don't have time in my rotation for another podcast. But I listened to Matt Leck one.
Yeah.
Matt Leck's an interesting kid.
Strange cat.
He's a strange cat.
Brendan Funny up there in North Dakota.
Yeah. That's about all I got.
I think that's a wrap. That went way longer than I thought it would, given that we had no content. We're up to the 35 minutes. That's a good wrap. Thank you for listening.
See ya.